Hey there, it's Neo from Neo Curiosity, and now the rogue academic himself. I am back. Hope you're having a good day so far. Stay safe, alright? Alright, let's get into it. Every once in a while, I'll be skimming through the thoughts in my head, and I'll be critical of a belief, idea, assumption, or what have you, and a question arises. Why do I believe that? Why do I believe, for example, the things I do about religion? Is the earth really fair or joy? Is ketchup actually tomato sauce? Did humans really evolve from apes? I'll stop after the last one, I promise. Is the right side of the brain really responsible for creative skills? The answer to the last two is no, in case you're wondering. In reality, Darwin never stated for a fact that humans came from monkeys, at least not directly. In his work titled On the Origins of Species, Darwin only said that monkeys, apes, and humans have a common ancestor because of the great similarities compared to other species. And for the other, people think that personalities whose right side of the brain is more developed tend to have good creative skills, and those who have the left side of the brain dominating tend to have better analytical and logical skills. However, recent research has completely destroyed this myth. Well, not destroyed, but it has created avenue for more consideration and scrutiny. Because after scientists analyzed the work of some 1,011 brains, the participants were aged 7 to 29. They didn't find any signs of left or right hemisphere domination. Now you should be thinking to yourself, if you're a victim of this error in reasoning, because we all are, the reason is simple. On one hand, most of the time, the belief, idea, assumption exists for a host of reasons, in part because, at least in my case, sometimes I've noticed some, like the example I gave just now of hemisphere domination. It's something I've heard many times before and never really stopped to consider the authenticity of it. But as we have it, it's not as true as we like to think it is. Or it could be, or at times we believe things out of convenience. Sometimes we believe things not just because they are true, but even though we know they are not necessarily true. But believing they are makes life and makes things in general a bit more palatable, at least. And believing something could be more subtle, a belief you rely on almost every day and couldn't fathom that it might actually be a misrepresentation, distortion of what it attempts to represent. Today we aren't here to analyze beliefs, ideas, etc. We're here to analyze the act itself, thinking. So let's think about thinking. I think a good place to start is to acknowledge that your thoughts are not your own. And it's important you don't take this for granted. Most of us, and I'm also sometimes guilty of this, forget that ideology, religion, or whatever is in question that I cherish or you cherish so much, and maybe even revere in some instances, isn't yours. It was conceived by someone else, and I have no right, and neither do you, to act as though these ideas in your head are your own. And coming to this realization, I had 3 questions. If my thoughts aren't mine, then which are mine and which aren't? And why does it even matter? Well, we come into the world and society, culture, religion, school gets you up to speed on the ideas, concepts, words, intricacies of society and what have you. So you learn what took centuries to formulate and refine in a couple of months or years. Some part of which, if you're like me, naturally, you're asking yourself, what's going on? What the hell am I doing here? But anyway, so after being inundated with this information, and you're beginning to have some modicum of an idea on how this all fits together and the mechanism that is society, and how you, the individual, are part of the cogs of this mechanism. Not knowing anything about the world around you, naturally, nobody questions anything, after all. Or do you know? This is how the math problem has been solved centuries before you were born. And this is how historic past events played out. And you weren't alive to witness them. So might as well shut up and listen and rely on the documentation of whatever else. And nobody questions anything, except every once in a while an outlier appears or is born that starts questioning or reforming things almost from a first principle standpoint. Contesting the truths of your time, the Galileos, the Teslas, and so forth, become the most hated race. The reason the errant reason exists is because, as stated earlier, nobody knows everything. So we have to rely on heuristics, conjecture, and assumptions that let's say other reasoning shortcuts to interact and function properly in the world, to accommodate for the gap in knowledge we lack. Things like stereotypes, because it makes it easier to predict a person's behavior, having a preset combination of actions, traits, and what have you associated with a person, or as is usually the case, a group. Things like religion, because of the uncertainty of life and our realization of a somewhat lonely existence if it is devoid of some divine meaning and or all-powerful being, force, whatever, governing and presiding over all of existence or creation. I'll have to break this segment into parts to make it not too long. So consider this part 1 of thinking about thinking. On this podcast or show, I'll talk about seemingly complex concepts or ideas and break them down and talk about them. In this segment or episode rather, you may not know it, but we were learning about epistemology, a school of thought that asks the question, what distinguishes belief from opinion, amongst other questions about the nature of belief and truth. That said, thanks for watching or listening depending on where you're getting this from. And don't forget to like, drop a comment, it really does help. And remain curious. Once again, it's the Rogue Academic and signing out. See you guys later.